Should politicians be forced to think about future generations when making decisions? Should governments have that front of mind? You might remember a few years ago, a group of school kids sued the Environment Minister, arguing that the Minister had a duty of care to protect young people from climate change. Now, they initially won the case and it made headlines around the world, but then they lost when it was appealed. And politicians have tried in the past to make this a bit of a priority, but there hasn't been much success. Well, now there's another attempt. Because today in Parliament, independent MP Dr Sophie introduced a bill to try and mandate that government decisions have to consider the long-term interests of current and future Australians. It's called the Wellbeing of Future Generations Bill, and Dr Sophie is with me now to explain. Dr Scoms, thank you very much for joining us on Hack.
Oh, such a pleasure, thanks.
Why did you think this should be a priority? What made you want to bring this bill in the first place?
Well, young people today are the first generation in modern history that will be worse off than their parents. And as a parent of 3 teens, that doesn't feel good. So we have a situation where there is young people are facing a convergence of crises. We've got the climate crisis, we've got the environmental crisis, extinction, the housing crisis, we've got an intergenerational inequality crisis. It's just a whole convergence of these various problems. And we've known about them for decades. They've been on the horizon, getting worse for decades, and we failed to act in a meaningful way, in an effective way. And so we need to look at why we are failing. Why have successive governments, successive policymakers made no impact on these crises? And when you look at it, it really comes down to this short-term decision-making cycle that we have and the siloed thinking, where different portfolios and departments and ministries are often working in isolation and can be working against other ministries in the government as well. So we need these ministries to be working in concert rather than in competition with one another.
Okay, so how would this bill change that? Like, what exactly would it do to make things different?
Well, it does a number of things. The first thing is it embeds or establishes a framework to embed the consideration of the well-being of future generations into every aspect of government decision-making and public body decision-making. So when a decision is being made, we not only have to consider how it's going to benefit current generations, current people, but actually how it will impact future generations to meet their needs and their well-being. So that's the first thing. That embeds long-term thinking into our decision-making. It also sets up for there to be a commissioner for the wellbeing of future generations to make sure this is actually implemented, because we need a change in culture, a change in our structures and a change in our systems from what we currently have. But a really key part of this is kicking off a national conversation to work out what type of future Australia we want to hand down to future generations as well. And they've done this piece of work in Wales, and it has been hugely successful. And the commissioner over there said you wouldn't think it was revolutionary to have a vision for a country. They now have one. Australia doesn't have one. And a country as well, I should say, like Norway, has a vision for their future. They've got a sovereign wealth fund of nearly $2 trillion. We've got a debt of nearly $1 trillion. So we need to be looking at which direction we're heading in as a country.
We actually spoke to the Commissioner for Future Generations from Wales a little while ago on Hack, and she outlined her role, and it was interesting to hear how other countries are doing things. Just to be clear, is this just around climate change or, all kinds of decisions?
All kinds of decisions,
okay.
I think. I mean, what you were mentioning before, the duty of care bill that's been really pushed by Anjali Sharma, she's doing an amazing job with her team. That is more around the climate change. This is around every piece of legislation. So it's embedding that long-term thinking into every piece of policy making that we do.
How likely, though, is it that this will pass? Because I do notice that you do have some support from other politicians. Bridget Archer, a Liberal MP, has voiced her support. You asked the Prime Minister about it today in Parliament. He's been out there talking about intergenerational inequality lately. Are you thinking this could actually have a future, or it's just about having the discussions to raise these issues so we can talk about it?
Look, absolutely this can have a future, because we've seen what's happened in Wales, and they really are leading the way, and they're making quite incredible changes. But it's strange the way it works here down in Canberra, because This is all about putting forward new ideas, fresh ideas. But what happens is I introduce a bill, or somebody who's not in government, such as myself, I'm an independent, I can introduce what's called a private member's bill. It then sits on the notice paper. Inevitably, it falls off the notice paper because any government usually doesn't debate an idea or a bill that isn't their own. But what it's all about, and we saw this happen when we finally got the National Anti-Corruption Commission going, that it's all about building a national conversation around this, building awareness, so that in the end it's the population that demands that something like this gets up.
Okay.
And we saw that happen with the Anti-Corruption Commission.
I mean, the election is only a few months away, Dr. Sophie Scombe. So the last election we saw a lot of support for independents like yourself. Do you think that's going to happen again?
Look, I think so, because what it is, I'm a community independent, so it's all about bringing people back into their democracy, because what happened was so many people were feeling cut out and shut out of their democracy, not heard, not listened to, and not represented. So it's kind of this exciting groundswell, this grassroots movement where people feel like they can actually be heard and have a say in their democracy. And I'm really, really keen to particularly bring young people back into that conversation, because it is their future that is being created right now as we speak.
I mean, the thing that people are very interested in, especially with independents, is who they'll be supporting if it is a tight election. Like if we see a hung parliament, if you're re-elected and neither Anthony Albanese or Peter Dutton wins an outright majority, who would you support?
Oh, we get asked that question a lot, and what I always say is it's very clear the policies that I'll be taking to the election. They come directly from my community, so it depends what the major parties put on the table. I'm all about the policies, not the parties. I'm not aligned to any party, so it'll be exciting to see what the major parties do put on the table, and something like this where we embed the consideration of future generations in our decision making so that we avert these major crises that we're having will be something that's really important.
Well, we'll be watching to see how it goes. Thank you so much for coming on and giving us a bit of an explanation, chatting to us about it. Independent MP Sophie Scombe, thank you very much for joining us on Hack.
Thanks so much.
And we've got some messages coming through. Someone says, damn right, they should be making decisions with that in mind. It infuriates me that they don't. And Andrew in Melbourne says politicians too often make decisions that benefit themselves. They don't care about young people or the wider community.